"Humans are absolutely ridiculous," King Varixian exclaimed, his luminescent scales flickering with amusement as he watched the curved blue planet through his ship's observation deck. "Look at them, Commander Talax. They spend half their time staring at tiny screens while walking, then act surprised when they collide with stationary objects." Commander Talax, his most trusted advisor, shifted uncomfortably beside him. His tentacles curled and uncurled, a sign of nervousness that Varixian had learned to recognize over their centuries of friendship. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should focus on the mission parameters. The Galactic Council expects our assessment of Earth's civilization within the next lunar cycle." Varixian waved one of his 4 arms dismissively, his royal ceremonial bangles chiming softly in the ship's filtered atmosphere. "Oh, please. The Council has been debating Earth's status for the past 3 centuries. What's another day of observation?" He leaned closer to the quantum glass viewport, his compound eyes zooming in on a small settlement nestled in the Rocky Mountains. Their cloaked ship hovered silently above the region humans called Colorado, completely invisible to Earth's primitive detection systems. Besides, Varixian continued, his voice taking on that tone that always made Talax nervous, the one that suggested their king was about to do something exceptionally undiplomatic. "These humans are fascinating. Did you know they created something called reality television, where they voluntarily embarrass themselves for entertainment? It's brilliant. Sire, your mother, Queen Nixia, specifically instructed." "Oh, mother and her instructions," Varixian rolled all 4 of his eyes simultaneously. "According to her, everything in the galaxy should be categorized, labeled, and filed away in neat little boxes. But look at them, Talax. They're chaotic and messy and completely unpredictable." The king's scales shifted to a deeper shade of blue as he watched a human child chase after something called a dog in the settlement below. The council saw humans as barely evolved primates, unworthy of joining the Galactic Federation. But Varixian had spent months studying them, and he saw something else entirely. They write poetry about stars they can barely see. They create art from pigments and emotions. They build towering structures just because they can, then fill them with plants because they miss nature. He chuckled, his antennae vibrating with excitement. They're wonderfully contradictory. Commander Talax's tentacles were now practically tied in knots. "Your Majesty, may I remind you that unauthorized direct contact with primitive species is strictly forbidden by galactic law, Section 7, subsection 42. Boring, Varixian interrupted, already heading toward the ship's transport chamber. "I'm going down for a closer look, sire. The atmospheric shields aren't calibrated for Earth's composition. The translation matrices haven't been field tested. The cultural integration protocols." But Varixian was already punching coordinates into the transport panel, his scales now pulsing with a mischievous purple glow. "Sometimes, my dear Talax, you have to throw the rulebook out the airlock and trust your gut well. All 3 of them, in our case." The last thing he heard before the transport beam engaged was Talax's exasperated sigh, followed by a muttered, "Queen Nixia is going to have my tentacles for dinner." Moments later, King Varixian materialized on Earth's surface, his personal cloaking field shimmering around him like a soap bubble in sunlight. The mountain air was crisp and thin, carrying scents his sensors had never detected before. He stood still for a moment, letting his compound eyes adjust to the direct sunlight so different from his homeworld's binary star system. Now, he whispered to himself, his translator working overtime to process Earth's multiple languages, "Let's see what trouble we can find." Varixian was so engrossed in examining a particularly fascinating dandelion that he almost missed the sound of approaching footsteps. Almost. His antennae twitched, catching the subtle vibrations of someone walking with careful, measured steps along the mountain trail. "Who's there?" a clear voice called out. "I can sense you, you know. Your energy signature is different." Varixian froze, his scales instinctively shifting to match the surrounding vegetation. That should have been impossible. His cloaking technology was the finest in 7 galaxies. Yet there stood a human female, no more than 20 Earth years old, looking directly at, well, not exactly at him, but definitely in his general direction. She took another step forward, her white cane sweeping the path before her. "You're about 10 feet ahead of me, slightly to the left. And you're tall, much taller than any human I've met." How Varixian's translator crackled as he spoke aloud for the first time on Earth. How can you possibly know that? The human smiled, and something about that smile made all three of Varixian's hearts skip a beat. I may be blind, but I see things others don't. Right now, you're giving off an energy field that feels like static electricity mixed with starlight if starlight had a feeling. Varixian deactivated his cloaking field, no point maintaining it now. That's remarkably accurate. I'm King Varixian of the Centaurian Empire, and you are. Isabella Martinez, she replied, doing a playful curtsy. And you're not just tall, you have 4 arms, compound eyes, and scales that change color. Oh, and antennae. Now you're just showing off. Varixian laughed, his scales shifting to an impressed gold. But you can't actually see me. Nope. Isabella popped the P sound in a way that delighted Varixian's linguistic processors. Lost my sight when I was 3. But I gained something else, the ability to sense energy patterns, auras, whatever you want to call it. Most humans think I'm just really good at echolocation or something. Fascinating. On my world, we have beings who can a sudden burst of static in his communicator cut him off. Varixian, the thunderous voice of Queen Mother Nixia, rattled his antennae. Return to the ship immediately. This unauthorized contact violates 37 different protocols. Isabella tilted her head. Someone sounds grumpy. That would be my mother. Varixian sighed, his scales dulling to an annoyed gray. Queen Mother Nixia, supreme ruler of the Centaurian Empire, keeper of the sacred laws, and dedicated destroyer of all things fun and interesting. I heard that. Nixia's voice crackled through the communicator. Need I remind you that humans are classified as a level 3 primitive species? They still think digital watches are pretty neat. Hey, Isabella protested. I'll have you know we've moved on to smartwatches now. Varixian couldn't help but laugh, which only infuriated his mother more. You find this amusing? This human should be properly mind-wiped and... Actually, Mother Varixian interrupted, an idea forming in his mind. According to galactic law, Section 12, subsection 7, any being capable of naturally detecting our presence demonstrates sufficient evolutionary advancement for initial contact. There was a long pause, followed by what Varixian was pretty sure were some choice Centaurian curse words. We will discuss this when you return, Nixia finally said, her voice dripping with royal disapproval. And we will discuss it at length. The communication cut off, and Isabella burst out laughing. Your mom sounds exactly like mine when I told her I wanted to live alone up here in the mountains. You live alone? Up here? Varixian asked, genuinely curious. Why? Because it's quiet, Isabella replied, finding a nearby rock and sitting down gracefully. Less sensory input to process. Also, fewer people asking if I need help crossing the street, or telling me how brave I am for existing. Though I guess meeting an alien king might qualify as actually brave. Meeting me isn't brave, Varixian said, settling down on the ground near her, his ceremonial robes probably getting ruined in the process. Now, standing up to my mother? That was brave. Isabella grinned. Well, Your Majesty, since we're both apparently in trouble with our parents, want to really make it worth it? Tell me about your world, and in return I can explain why humans think putting pineapple on pizza is a controversial topic worthy of starting wars over. Deal, Varixian agreed, his scales brightening to an excited pink. Though I should warn you, on my world, starting wars over food is actually a time-honored tradition. Over the next few weeks, the rocky outcropping became their secret meeting spot. Every day, precisely when Earth's sun reached its highest point, Varixian would teleport down from his ship, and Isabella would already be there waiting, usually with some new human oddity to share. So you're telling me, Varixian said one afternoon, holding a chocolate bar like it might explode, that humans intentionally consume a substance that's technically poisonous to them, just because it produces pleasant sensations, says the alien who literally eats starlight. Isabella teased, sitting cross-legged on her usual rock. Try it, just a small piece. Varixian's scales shifted through several shades of uncertainty before he finally took a microscopic bite. His antennae shot straight up. By the sacred nebulas, this is mind-blowing. Dangerous, he exclaimed, already unwrapping a second bar. Do you know what would happen if my people discovered this? We'd probably invade Earth just for your chocolate reserves. Isabella laughed, the sound echoing off the mountain walls. Well, then I guess it's good that you're learning we're more than just a primitive species to conquer. Varixian's scales dulled slightly. The council meeting yesterday, they're pushing for a decision about Earth. Mother presented a 40,000-page report about human deficiencies. Only 40,000? We must be improving, Isabella quipped, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Commander Talax had to physically restrain me when she started listing human sensory limitations as proof of your inferiority. His antennae drooped. The irony that I was defending your species because of a human who sees more than any of my people. Hey, Isabella reached out, unerringly finding his hand. She'd long since memorized the sound of his scale patterns. Being different doesn't mean being inferior. You know what I see when I look at your people? A civilization so advanced they've forgotten how to wonder. What do you mean? Take right now, for example. Your scales are shifting through colors of confusion: violet, deep blue, back to violet. But you're not just confused. Are you? You're curious, excited, maybe a little scared. Humans feel all those things at once because we haven't figured everything out yet. That's not weakness, that's being alive. Varixian's communicator buzzed again, probably another summons from his mother, but for the first time in his life, he turned it off completely. You know what the really funny thing is, he said, pulling out another chocolate bar. In all our advanced studies of Earth, no one ever thought to just talk to a human. We were so busy measuring your technological progress, we never bothered to measure your hearts. Well, technically you have 3 hearts, so maybe you're just working with a different metric system, Isabella grinned. Their laughter was interrupted by a distant rumble. Varixian's antennae twitched nervously. That's a Centaurian diplomatic vessel entering Earth's atmosphere. The council members, they're coming for an official inspection. Let them come, Isabella said firmly, standing up. If they want to judge humanity, they should have to look us in the eye while doing it. Metaphorically speaking, in my case. Isabella Varixian's scales shifted to a worried purple. They're not like me. They won't find your jokes amusing or your insights profound. To them, you're just a primitive blind human. She smiled, that smile again, the one that had first captivated him. Good. Then they won't see me coming. Now, hand over that last chocolate bar. We're going to need energy for what comes next. As Varixian watched her confidently navigate the rocky path back down the mountain, he realized something that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. He was no longer afraid of disappointing his mother or the council. He was afraid of disappointing Isabella. The teleportation beam had barely finished materializing Varixian at their usual meeting spot when Queen Mother Nixia's voice boomed across the mountain clearing. So this is where you've been sneaking off to. Varixian's scales paled to a sickly white as his mother's massive form shimmered into view. Behind her stood 6 members of the Galactic Council, their expressions ranging from disgusted to morbidly curious. Commander Talax hovered at the back, his tentacles practically tied into a bow of anxiety. Mother, I can explain. Explain? Explain. Nixia's voice caused several birds to flee from nearby trees. The crown prince of the Centaurian Empire, consorting with a primitive species. Have you lost all 3 of your minds? Good afternoon, Queen Nixia. Isabella's calm voice cut through the tension as she appeared on the trail. Your energy signature is exactly as angry as Varixian described it, like a supernova having a temper tantrum. How dare you address me directly? Nixia's scales flashed dangerous shades of red. Guards, seize this human and prepare her for mind wiping. 2 royal guards moved forward, but Varixian stepped between them and Isabella. Touch her, and I'll renounce my claim to the throne right here, right now. A collective gasp rippled through the council members. Nixia's antennae twitched violently. You would throw away 10,000 years of royal lineage for this. For my friend, Varixian finished, his scales settling into a determined gold. Who has shown me more about true intelligence and wisdom in a few weeks than I've learned in centuries of royal education? Oh, please, one of the council members stepped forward, his ceremonial robes rustling. What could this blind primitive possibly teach us? Well, for starters, Isabella said, stepping around Varixian, I could teach you that pointing your plasma weapon at me is useless when I can sense you charging it up from a mile away. The council member hastily hid his weapon, looking embarrassed. You see, Nixia turned to the council. They're dangerous, unpredictable. We must act now to neutralize the threat. I propose immediate invasion and... A challenge. Isabella's words silenced everyone. What did you say? Nixia demanded. I challenge you. According to your own laws, which Varixian has been teaching me about, any species can challenge for recognition before the Galactic Council. Varixian's antennae perked up. She's right. Section 947, paragraph 23, the Right of Species Advancement Challenge. You can't be serious, Nixia scoffed. The challenge hasn't been invoked in over 50,000 years. Scared, Isabella's grin was downright mischievous. Worried a blind primitive might actually win. Varixian watched his mother's scales cycle through colors of rage, indignation, and finally grudging curiosity. He knew that look. It was the same one he'd had when first meeting Isabella. The terms, Nixia demanded. Give me 3 days to prove humanity's worth, Isabella said. If I fail, I'll submit to mind wiping voluntarily, and Earth's fate will be in your hands. If I succeed, Earth joins the Galactic Federation with full rights. Isabella, no, Varixian grabbed her hand. You don't know what you're risking. Actually, I do, she squeezed his hand back. I'm risking everything for a chance to prove that being different doesn't mean being less. Sound familiar? The council members huddled together, whispering in various alien languages. Finally, the eldest stepped forward. We accept the challenge. 3 days, starting tomorrow at dawn. Nixia's scales darkened with satisfaction. I hope you understand, human, that no primitive species has ever passed this challenge. Well then, Isabella's smile never wavered. It's about time someone opened your eyes to new possibilities. Though I admit, that's a bit ironic coming from me. As the council and guards teleported back to their ships, Varixian felt his scales cycling through colors of worry. You realize my mother will make this as difficult as possible. Good, Isabella replied, her expression determined. Because I'm about to show the Galactic Council something they've never seen before, humanity at its finest. But first. She held out her hand. Got any chocolate left? Challenging an alien empire really works up an appetite. The grand chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with nervous energy as thousands of alien species crowded the floating observation platforms. At the center, Isabella stood calmly, her white cane tapping gently against the crystalline floor. Your challenges, human, are threefold, announced High Counselor Zephrix, his bioluminescent tendrils swaying. First, demonstrate advanced problem solving. Second, prove cultural sophistication. Third, show us something we have never seen in 50,000 years of galactic civilization. Queen Mother Nixia's scales rippled with smug satisfaction. Impossible tasks for a primitive species, let alone a disabled one. Speaking of primitive, Isabella's voice carried clearly through the chamber. Did you really think I wouldn't notice you replaced my cane with a replica? The one that would collapse during my presentation. A murmur ran through the crowd as Isabella pulled out a second cane from her jacket. Here's the thing about being blind, you learn to always have a backup plan. Nixia's scales flushed with embarrassment as several council members turned to glare at her. Now, for your first challenge, Isabella smiled. Computer, play the file Varixian helped me upload. The chamber's holographic display sprang to life, showing Earth's history of problem-solving: the pyramids, the printing press, the moon landing, heart transplants, each achievement flickering past. Impressive, a council member admitted, but these are past achievements. What can you show us? How about this? Isabella pulled out a small device. A universal translator, built last night. Unlike yours, it doesn't just translate languages, it translates experiences. She activated the device, and suddenly every being in the chamber gasped. They were experiencing the world as Isabella did: waves of energy, patterns of life, the very essence of existence seen without eyes. That's a remarkable, High Counselor Zephrix whispered, but cultural sophistication requires. Music, Isabella interrupted, pulling out a violin. The universal language. Her bow touched the strings, and pure emotion filled the chamber. Joy, sorrow, hope, fear, all woven together in a melody that made Varixian's scales shimmer with colors he didn't know he could produce. Even Nixia seemed moved, though she quickly composed herself. Party tricks and primitive string instruments prove nothing. Then how about this for your third challenge? Isabella set down her violin. Something you've never seen in 50,000 years of civilization. Computer, display Earth's history of overcoming prejudice. The holographic display showed centuries of human struggle, people fighting for rights, breaking down barriers, challenging preconceptions. Then it showed something else, thousands of images of differently abled humans achieving remarkable things. You see us as primitive because we're different. Isabella's voice grew stronger. Because we don't have your technology or your evolutionary advantages. But here's what you've missed: our greatest strength isn't in our abilities, it's in how we rise above our limitations. She turned slowly, addressing the entire chamber. You've mastered space travel, but we've mastered adapting. You've conquered physics, but we're still learning to conquer our own prejudices. And that struggle, that constant push to be better than we were yesterday, that's what makes us worthy of joining your federation. A new voice spoke up, a being Varixian recognized as Ambassador Lyra from the Andromeda Galaxy. The human speaks truth. My own civilization once faced your prejudices, Council. Perhaps it's time for change. Other voices joined in, species after species standing to support Earth's inclusion. Varixian watched his mother's scales shift through colors of disbelief as her sure victory crumbled. High Counselor Zephrix raised his tendrils for silence. Never in my centuries of service have I seen such a demonstration. But Queen Nixia raises valid concerns about human advancement. Oh, come on, Isabella laughed, the sound echoing through the chamber. Your Majesty, would a primitive species have figured out that you're currently sitting on a malfunctioning gravity pad that's about to fail? Nixia barely had time to look down before her floating platform wobbled. Without missing a beat, Isabella pointed her cane, activating the Universal Translator's secondary function, a gravity stabilizer. How did you? Nixia's scales shifted to a shocked pink. The same way I noticed your sabotage attempt. The same way I found Varixian when he was cloaked. The same way I just proved that sometimes what you see as a disability is actually a different kind of ability. Isabella's smile was radiant. So, council members still think humans are primitive? The Grand Chamber erupted in cheers as High Counselor Zephrix made the official proclamation. By unanimous decision -1 abstention from Queen Mother Nixia, Earth is hereby granted full membership in the Galactic Federation. Varixian's scales blazed with every color of joy as he watched Isabella accept the ceremonial orb of Federation. His mother, standing off to the side, managed to look both annoyed and oddly proud at the same time. Furthermore, Zephrix continued, in recognition of her extraordinary demonstration of human potential, we name Isabella Martinez as Earth's first galactic ambassador. Really? Isabella grinned. Does that mean I get one of those fancy floating platforms? Because I have some ideas for modifications. The chamber filled with laughter, a sound that would have been unthinkable just days ago. Even some of Nixia's scales flickered with reluctant amusement. Varixian stepped forward, his ceremonial robes shimmering. As Crown Prince of the Centaurian Empire, I request permission to speak. Always so formal, Isabella whispered, just loud enough for his antennae to catch. Even after all that chocolate we smuggled into the council chamber. Suppressing a very UN royal snicker, Varixian addressed the assembly. For centuries, we prided ourselves on being the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. We measured progress by technology, by conquests, by how far we could see into space. Yet we were blind to the most important things. He turned to Isabella. It took a human who sees with her heart to teach us that true advancement isn't about what abilities you have, but how you use them. Not about how far you can see, but how deeply you can understand. Great speech, Isabella said. But you still owe me a chocolate bar for every time your mother tried to have me mind wiped. That's going to bankrupt the royal treasury, Varixian laughed. Queen Mother Nixia suddenly stepped forward, her scales shifting to a color Varixian had never seen before. Perhaps we were too hasty in our judgments, although I still say chocolate should be classified as a controlled substance. Does this mean you're not going to have Commander Talax's tentacles for dinner? Isabella asked innocently. Don't push your luck, Ambassador Nixia replied, but there was a hint of warmth in her voice. As the chamber began to clear, Varixian noticed Isabella wiping away a tear. Are you crying? Happy tears, she assured him. I was just thinking about that first day in the mountains when you were so worried about breaking protocols. Now look at us, we've rewritten them. Speaking of protocols, Varixian's scales shifted to a mischievous purple. As Earth's ambassador, you should know that Centaurian tradition requires regular cultural exchange meetings, preferably on mountaintops, with chocolate. Isabella laughed that laugh that had first changed his world. You know what the best part of all this is? For a civilization that prides itself on seeing everything, you never saw this coming. A blind human teaching the galaxy how to truly see. Perhaps said High Counselor Zephrix, who had quietly remained, that is exactly why the universe brought you together. Sometimes we must close our eyes to open our minds. Now you're getting it, Isabella smiled. Though fair warning, Earth has this thing called dad jokes that I'm definitely introducing to the Galactic Council. The universe help us all, Varixian groaned, his scales flickering with joy. As they left the chamber together, a blind human ambassador and an alien king who had learned to see differently, Isabella turned to him. You know what this means, right? What? We're going to need a bigger chocolate factory.